Today we're going to take a look at factorising and solving quadratics where a equals 1. If we take a look at the general formula here, which is the ax squared plus bx plus c, that is a general formula for a quadratic. The a is the number in front of the x squared, the b is the number in front of the x, and the c is the coefficient or the number that doesn't change. Here we're looking at where a equals 1. When a equals 1, we don't normally write 1x squared, we just write x squared as in the question here. So if we take a look at the question, we've identified the quadratic, we've identified that a equals 1. Now we've got to solve it. First thing I do is I just open up two brackets. Do not forget the equals 0, that's an important part of the question. I'm going to put an x at the beginning of each bracket because I know that x times x gives me my x squared. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my minus 12 and I'm just going to draw it into a little table over here. Now, because I've got minus 12, I've got to ask myself two questions. Which two numbers multiply together to give me minus 12, but add together to give me plus 4? Okay. If I look at two numbers, I know that one of those numbers must be a negative because a positive times a negative gives me a negative. I don't know which one yet. So first I'm going to find two numbers that multiply together to give me 12. I've got 1 and 12. Well, 1 times 12 is 12, but I can't add or take away 1 and 12 to give me plus 4. So that's no good to me. I'm going to try a next set of numbers. I've got 2 and 6. 2 and 6 gives me 12. But can I do anything with 2 and 6 to get plus 4? Well, if I do minus 2, now let me just check this. Minus 2 times 6 gives me minus 12. Minus 2 plus 6 gives me plus 4. So those two are the right numbers for my solution. I'm just going to put those into the bracket. I've got minus 2 and I've got plus 6. So that's my quadratic factorized. I've now got to solve it. So I take one bracket at a time. I've got x minus 2 equals 0. I've got to get x on its own, so I've got to get rid of the minus 2. The opposite, or the inverse of minus 2, is plus 2. So I have to add 2 to both sides. That gives me x equals 0 plus 2, which is 2. Or I take my other bracket, x plus 6 equals 0. I have to get x on its own, so I have to get rid of plus 6. The inverse of plus 6 is minus 6. That gives me x equals minus 6. Those are the two solutions for my question. Here I've got an example for you to try. Okay, first identify if it's a quadratic and then find out if a is 1 and then have a go at the question. Just pause the video and we'll run through it in just a second. Okay, if I take a look at the question, firstly I have to identify, is it a quadratic? I've got my x squared, I've got my x, and I've got my coefficient. So it is a quadratic. The number in front of the x squared, there isn't a number there, so it must be 1. So this is a type of question I want to do. Now again, I just open up my two brackets as we did in the previous example. Because I'm solving it, I've also got to put it equal to 0. I'm putting my x at the beginning of each bracket, and then I take my plus 5. And the two questions I ask is, which two numbers multiply together to give me plus 5, but add together to give me minus 6? Well, two numbers that multiply together to give me plus 5 is going to be 1 and 5. But what can I do with these to add to give me minus 6? Well, if I put minus 1 and minus 5, because I know a minus times a minus gives me a plus, so minus 1 times minus 5 is plus 5, and minus 1 minus 5 gives me minus 6, so that's correct. I'm now going to put those in. I've now factorized it, but now I've got to solve it. So let's take one bracket at a time. I've got x minus 1 equals 0. To get the x on its own, I do the inverse of the minus 1 on both sides. That gives me x equals 1. Or I take my second bracket, x minus 5 equals 0. I want to get x on its own again, so I add 5 to both sides. That gives me x equals 5. Those are my two solutions to my quadratic. Here are two examples for you to have a go at. Press pause, have a go, and then we'll run through it in just a few seconds. Okay, if I take a look at the first one, I've got a quadratic where a equals 1, so I know that I can just open up two brackets. I put my equal to 0 because I've got to solve it. I then put in my x's, and then I take my minus 15, and I ask my two questions. My two questions are, what two numbers multiply together to give me minus 15, but add together to give me minus 2? I can't think of anything off the top of my head, so I have to have a technique to find something. I know that one of the numbers is going to be negative, but I'll deal with that in a second. Firstly, what two numbers multiply together to give me 15? I've got 1 and 15. Can I add or take away those to get minus 2? No, I can't. My next number I'm going to go for is 3 and 5. 3 times 5 gives me 15, and I've got to add or take these away to get minus 2. If I do minus 5 and plus 3, let's check that. This is the important bit. 3 times minus 5 gives me minus 15, and 3 take away 5 gives me minus 2. So these are the correct numbers. I'm just going to put these in. I've now got to solve it. I take one bracket at a time. X plus 3 equals 0. Take away the plus 3, or do the inverse of the plus 3, and I get x equals minus 3. Or I take my other bracket, x minus 5 equal to 0. I do the inverse of plus 5, and I get x equals 5. Those are my two solutions for that one. This one looks a little bit more tricky, but let's have a go. Okay. Again, it's a quadratic where a equals 1. My two brackets, I'm solving it, so it equals to 0. I'm putting in my x's. Now I take my plus 36. And I ask my two questions. Which two numbers multiply together to give me plus 36 and add together to give me minus 13? I know both the numbers must be minus because when they multiply they give me a plus, and when they add they give me a minus. Okay, so I can't think of the numbers off the top of my head, so let's go through and see if we can figure it out. Let's try 1 times 36. 1 times 36 is 36, but I can't add or take away 1 and 36 to give me minus 13. Let's try 2 and 18. 2 times 18 gives me 36, but again I can't add or take away to get minus 13. 3 and 12. 3 times 12 gives me 36. Again, I still can't add or take those away to get minus 13. 4 times 9. 4 times 9 gives me 36. And oh look, if I have a minus 4 and a minus 9, that will give me minus 13. Let's just check it from here now. Minus 4 times minus 9 gives me plus 36. Minus 4 take away 9 gives me minus 13. So those are my correct numbers. So I've got minus 4 in here and minus 9 in there. To solve it, I take one bracket at a time. I do the inverse of minus 4 to get x on its own. So x equals 4. Or I take my second bracket. I want to get x on its own, so I do the inverse of minus 9. X equals 9. Those are the two solutions for my question.